Dust hangs thick in the air, a choking veil that clings to sweat-slicked skin. The sun beats down like a hammer on an anvil, turning the Syrian plain into a furnace where men gasp for breath between the screams. You hear at first the low rumble of hooves, thousands strong, shaking the earth like distant thunder. Then the clash, iron on iron, shield splintering, the wet thud of bodies hitting sand. Amid the chaos, a figure stumbles forward on his knees, his purple cloak torn and caked in mud. His hands, once raised in imperial salute, now claw at the ground, chains bite into his wrists. Above him, a rider dismounts, his shadow falling long and cold. The rider's boot presses down, not on the fallen man's back, but deliberate, unyielding, on his neck. The captive's head snaps up, eyes wide, meeting the gaze of his conqueror, and in that locked stare, something worse than death begins. A promise, a unraveling. But this is no end. This is where the true breaking starts. What you're about to hear involves captivity, degradation, and acts of intimate violence against the vulnerable. These events draw from ancient accounts, raw and unflinching in their horror. They're documented, but they cut deep. If this pulls you too close to the edge, step away, I'll understand. For those who stay, we don't linger on the wounds. We trace the machine that forged them, the empire's cold gears turning human lives into lessons. Imagine Rome not as marble columns and laurel crowns, but as a vast, creaking engine pistons of legions pounding eastward, fueled by senators' gold and slaves' sweat. For centuries, that machine had ground against the sands of Persia, chewing up kings and spitting out tribute. Parthian arrows once darkened the sky over Carrhae, but Rome always rebuilt, always pushed back, until now. This wasn't some fevered tyrant's whim. This was precision. A counterweight swinging back, heavy with the weight of a rising sun. In the 3rd century, as plague clawed through the empire's veins and barbarians bayed at its gates, one man saw the fractures. Shapur, king of kings, didn't just fight Rome. He dissected it city by city, soul by soul, until the emperor himself became the specimen. And in that capture, the revenge wasn't in the blade, it was in the watching, the forced witness to a throne's true fall. Why does this echo across 2 millennia? Because power's cruelest cut isn't the kill. It's the mirror it holds up, showing you what you've wrought. Shapur didn't conquer land alone. He conquered the illusion of invincibility. And in the gaze of one broken man, Rome saw its own fragility laid bare. The machine didn't start with blood. It hummed to life in the shadow of an older empire's corpse. Picture the Iranian plateau, a spine of mountains cradling valleys where rivers run like veins of silver. Here, in the early 3rd century, a new order stirred. Ardashir, a blacksmith's son turned warlord, had toppled the Parthian kings, those horse lords who'd harried Rome for generations. By 224, Ardashir crowned himself Shahanshah, king of kings, forging the Sasanian realm from the ashes of old feuds. His empire stretched from the Euphrates to the Indus, a mosaic of Zoroastrian fire priests, Armenian horsemen, and Mesopotamian scribes. But it was fragile, this newborn giant. Rome loomed west, its legions a perpetual thorn, raiding border towns like a wolf at the fold. Ardashir struck first, in 230, marching on Mesopotamia. He sacked Nisibis, that dusty crossroads of trade and treachery, and pushed to the Syrian gates. Rome reeled, but held. Emperors came and went. Alexander Severus, young and bookish, fell to his own mutinous troops in 235, his head on a pike. The crisis deepened. Gallienus in the west, shadows of anarchy everywhere. Into this forge stepped Shapur. Born around 215, he was no delicate prince. Ardashir raised him in the saddle, from the cradle of Istakar's rocky temples to the bloodied fields of Istria. As a boy, Shapur watched his father bind the empire's tribes, not with oaths alone, but with iron oaths sealed in conquest. One formative clash etched deep, the siege of Hatra in 240. That Arabian fortress, once an ally against Rome, turned foe. Ardashir laid it low, but not before its scorpion-tailed arrows felled hundreds. Shapur, barely 20, led the final assault, scaling walls slick with night rain, his men torches in the dark. The city burned, its queen's screams a prelude to silence. From that pyre, Shapur learned the rhythm of empire, mercy as a tool, cruelty as the hammer. He saw how Rome's machine thrived on division, senators scheming, provincials restless while Persia demanded unity, the fire god Ahura Mazda demanding all bend to one flame. Ardashir died that same year, 240, his body wrapped in gold-threaded silk and laid in a fire temple's heart. Shapur ascended, co-ruler turned sole Shahanshah, his crown a diadem of hammered gold. But the throne was no gift. Nobles whispered of his youth. Roman spies slithered across the border, whispering of weakness. Shapur moved like a storm gathering. He crushed a rebellion in the east, Armenian lords who dreamed of independence, their fortresses reduced to rubble-strewn echoes. He married wisely noblewomen from Parthian houses, binding old blood to new, yet the West called loudest. Rome, under Gordian III, that boy emperor with curls like a poet's, launched a counterstrike in 242. Shapur met them at Resena, the desert wind whipping cloaks like flags of defiance. The Romans broke, Gordian slain, some said by his own guards, others by Persian blades. Shapur claimed the kill, his rock carvings eternalizing the lie. Philip the Arab, Gordian's successor, sued for peace, trailing gold across the sands like a penitent's offering. But peace? That was the machine's lubricant, not its fuel. Shapur turned inward, forging the gears that would grind Rome finer. He rebuilt cities Gundishapur, from Antioch's deported stones, a hub of aqueducts and academies where Greek philosophers debated under Persian stars. He tolerated faiths, Zoroastrian fires for the core, Christian crosses for the fringes, even Mani's dualist whispers in the courts. Tolerance wasn't kindness, it was calculus. A divided foe crumbles faster. By 252, the borders itched again. Shapur struck Syria, that fertile crescent of olives and intrigue. At Barbalissos, on the Euphrates bend, he shattered a Roman host, 60,000, chronicles say, their bodies bloating in the river like forgotten tribute. Villages emptied, their people chained in caravans snaking east. Smoke rose from Antioch's libraries, scrolls curling like dying serpents. Rome howled, but the east was a maw, swallowing legions whole. Shapur paused then, not from mercy but method. He sent envoys to his brother Narse, governing Armenia, with orders, fortify the flanks. The machine whirred spies in Roman camps, forges hammering cataphract armor, priests chanting for Mazda's favor. And in the quiet nights, Shapur walked the palace gardens in Bishapur, his new city of white stone and blue tile, pondering the eagle that perched on Rome's standards. It had clawed too long. Now it would fold its wings. But one thread pulled tighter, the emperor himself. Valerian, that stern-faced Illyrian, had risen in 253, his edicts harsh as winter gales. He persecuted Christians, those rootless believers spreading like ivy through the provinces. Temples closed, martyrs burned. To Shapur, it reeked of fear, a machine seizing up, its operators blind to the rust. The turning point came in a scout's whisper. Valerian marched east, 30 legions strong, to reclaim the lost. Shapur smiled in the lamplight. The eagle flew into the trap, and the first teeth closed. The air in Edessa, that spring of 260, carried the scent of wild thyme and distant rain, deceptive, almost kind. The city huddled on its hill, walls of baked brick scarred from Parthian sieges long past. Olive groves dotted the plains below, their silver leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Roman banners snapped from the ramparts, the scarlet of the 12th thunderbolt, eagles glinting on poles held by veterans with salt-crusted beards. Inside, merchants haggled over Syrian glass, their voices a babble of Aramaic and Latin. Families gathered in courtyards, children chasing pigeons under the gaze of marble gods. Valerian had arrived weeks earlier, his camp a sprawl of white tents and supply wagons groaning under amphorae of wine. At 55, he was no stripling broad-shouldered, his face a map of frontier scars, eyes sharp as a falcon's. Born to equestrian stock in Illyria, he'd climbed through the ranks, consul under Trajan's heirs, governor of provinces where barbarians tested borders like wolves at a door. Father to Gallienus, co-emperor in the west, he dreamed of restoring the old order stability through steel. Before the storm, Valerian walked the forums, his toga crisp despite the heat. He consulted augurs over entrails steaming in the dust, their omens murky as the Tigris at flood. His wife had passed years back, her memory a quiet ache. His daughters, grown and fierce, traveled in his train advisors in silk, their counsel whispered in candle-lit tents. One, let's call her the elder, with hair like burnished copper, often rode beside him, her laughter cutting the march's monotony. She quoted Virgil, dreamed of Rome's hills. Valerian cherished that reminders of what he fought for, not glory alone, but hearth. His men adored him for it, centurions who'd served under Decius, sharing rations around fires where tales of past triumphs warmed the night. Plague had nipped at their heels from Anatolia fevered coughs. Graves dug hasty in the dark, but they pressed on. Shapur's host was said to lurk near Carrhae, that ancient graveyard of Roman pride. Scouts reported cataphracts gleaming like iron waves, Arab archers with bows curved as scimitars. Valerian rallied them at dawn. We are the spine of empire. Bend not. The confrontation brewed slow, like tea in a nomad's kettle. Shapur's banners crested the horizon, first crimson silk embroidered with fire altars, borne by spearmen in scale mail. His army numbered 70,000, give or take. Immortals in golden greaves, elephants trumpeting from India, slingers from the Zagros who could blind a man at 200 paces. Shapur rode at the fore, 35 now, his beard trimmed precise, eyes dark pools reflecting the sun. He'd inherited his father's build, tall, unyielding, but added grace, a hunter's poise. Envoys rode out under parley flags, white cloths snapping like doves. Valerian met them in his pavilion, maps unrolled on ivory tables. Terms? He demanded, voice gravel from command. The Persian envoy, a silk-robed magus with coal-lined eyes, bowed low. The King of Kings offers peace. Return the border forts. Pay homage in Ctesiphon. Valerian laughed, sharp as a blade's edge. Homage? To barbarians? His fist clenched on the table's edge. Tell your master Rome bows to no man. The envoy's smile was a sliver of moon. Then let the gods decide. Refusal hung in the air like unsheathed steel. That night, campfires dotted the plain, Roman on one side, Persian on the other, a river of flame dividing fates. Valerian paced his tent, daughters at his side, their faces pale masks of resolve. Father, the omens. The younger murmured, twisting a bracelet of emeralds. He silenced her with a hand on her shoulder, warm and steady. We hold Edessa. They break on our walls. Dawn broke bloody. Horns blared, a cacophony of bone and bronze. Shapur's cataphracts charged first, horses armored to the fetlock, lances lowered like a forest of spears. Roman pila flew in answer, darkening the sky, thudding into shields with meaty cracks. The lines met in a roar, men grappling, swords hacking limbs, the ground churning to red mud. Elephants rampaged through gaps, trunks flailing like scythes, crushing shields underfoot. Valerian, from his command ridge, bellowed orders, his voice lost in the din. His guard formed a wedge, pushing forward, but plague had hollowed ranks, fever-weakened boys falling to arrows that whispered death. The act itself blurred into nightmare's haze. As dusk bled the light to bruise purple, Shapur's flankers wheeled, encircling the Roman core. Valerian's horse reared, struck by a slinger's stone. He tumbled, rolling in dust that tasted of iron. Hands seized him rough, calloused, Persian voices barking triumph. His helmet clattered away, diadem bent. Bound, he was dragged through the melee, past heaps of the fallen. A centurion's hand still clutching his eagle standard, another's guts spilling like uncoiled rope. His daughter's cries cut sharp, separated in the crush, their guards overrun. Shapur rode up then, dismounting with fluid grace, his boot halting inches from Valerian's face. "Emperor," he said, voice smooth as oiled leather, "the eagle has landed." No blade fell, no final thrust, just the chain's cold kiss, and the march east, under stars indifferent as coins. Word spread like fever through the remnants. Survivors staggered to Antioch, mouths foaming tales. The emperor taken, his staff in irons, the praetorian prefect's head on a lance. In Rome, the Senate chamber echoed with wails, senators tearing togas, augurs fleeing to their hills. Gallienus, in the west, burned incense to forgotten gods, his decrees frantic. Hold the line, avenge. But this wasn't vengeance's seed, it was the system's reveal. Shapur hadn't slain a man, he'd captured a symbol, The machine of empire ran on emperors, god-kings whose fall toppled thrones. Deportations followed, hundreds of thousands from Caesarea, Antioch scholars chained to plows in Persis. They built dams, bridged rivers, their skills twisted into service. One brief echo in our time, modern sieges, where victors parade captives on screens, not for justice, but to fracture morale. Shapur knew, break the watcher, and the watched crumbles. But that wasn't the worst part. From the dust of Edessa, the machine shifted gears not with thunder, but a grinding whisper. We turn now from the emperor's fall to the eyes that enforced it. Picture a captain in Shapur's guard, a weathered Armenian named Tirdad, his face scarred from Hatra's walls. Tirdad wasn't born to cruelty. He was forged in it, a boy orphaned by Roman raids, swearing oaths over his father's grave. Now, 30 campaigns deep, he rode herd on the captives, snaking east 30,000 souls, a river of rags and chains under merciless sun. His orders were simple: preserve the skilled, break the proud. Valerian marched among them, not in a cage of gold, but bound to a cart, his purple faded to beggar's brown. Tirdad watched him daily, noting the man's ritual. At each halt, Valerian knelt in the dirt, tracing Latin prayers with a stick. His daughters huddled close like shadowed birds. The spread was methodical, a web spun from Ctesiphone's marble halls. Shapur's scribes tallied, engineers to the dams, senators to the mines, women to the weaving halls. Incentives flowed down gold to loyal satraps, titles to captains who quashed whispers of revolt. Tirdad earned a silver armband for marching the empress's kin unbroken. He wore it heavy, its gleam mocking the chains he guarded. Villages along the route emptied, not with swords, but edicts. Yield your daughters, or yield your hearths. Whole clans vanished into Persia's heart, their accents mingling in Gundashapur's markets, Syrian spices sold by Cappadocian hands. Numbers blurred into faces. A potter from Tarsus, his kiln dreams now fueling royal forges. A healer from Antioch, her herbs brewing elixirs for Persian queens. One moment pierced the routine, sharp as a hidden blade. Near the Zagros passes, where pines whispered like conspirators, Tirdad's patrol cornered a knot of escapees, Roman auxiliaries, gaunt and feral, led by a scarred tribune clutching a stolen dagger. They fought cornered, like rats in a granary, one woman's scream cutting the fray as an arrow found her thigh. Tirdad parried a thrust, his sword biting deep, but hesitated at the last. A boy, no more than 12, shielding his mother's form. The machine demanded cull, but Tirdad saw his own ghost there, small and defiant. He turned away, letting the shadows swallow them. Report them fled, he growled to his lieutenant. A lie, small as a seed, but it rooted. That night, by a fire fed with cedar knots, Tirdad carved a crude eagle into his shield's reverse not mockery, but memory. The stars wheeled overhead, cold witnesses, and for a breath, the wind carried time from Syrian fields, a ghost scent of what was lost. Yet the gears turned on. In Ctesiphon, Shapur's court buzzed like a hive envoys from Kushan kings bearing ivory, magi divining futures in flame. Reports climbed the chain, satraps tallying yields from deportee labor, priests praising Mazda's favor. The persecution wasn't frenzy, it was policy, a ledger of humiliations balancing old scores. Rome had flayed Persian envoys, paraded captive queens. Now, the scales tipped. Tirdad's dispatches reach the throne. The eagle bends, but does not break. Shapur's reply, sealed in lapis wax, bend it further. And in the quiet marches, under moon that silvered chains, Tirdad wondered if the machine ever tired, or if it simply consumed its keepers too. He made one crucial mistake. Time stretched thin in the gorge that day, the air heavy with the tang of pine sap and unwashed fear. Shadows pooled long in the narrows, where the royal road twisted like a serpent's spine through cliffs veined with quartz. Shapur's pavilion rose at the trail's end, a tent of crimson silk, its fringes stirring like blood in the breeze. Guards in lamellated bronze stood sentinel, their halberds catching the dying sun in slivers of fire. Inside, braziers smoked with myrrh, curling tendrils that masked the underscent of sweat and despair. Valerian entered last, wrists raw from weeks of iron, his tunic a patchwork of mendicant grime. Flanked by Tirdad and a veiled magus, he moved with the stiff dignity of a stag cornered head high, though his eyes betrayed the hollows of sleepless nights. His daughters preceded him, the elder's arm linked to the younger's, their steps a fragile chain of solidarity. The camp's hush pressed in, broken only by a distant elephant's rumble, low and mournful. Shapur reclined on cushions of dyed wool, his fingers drumming a rhythm on a goblet of chased silver. At 35, he was the machine's heart, vital, unyielding, his gaze a blade that dissected intent before words formed. He'd summoned this audience not for parley, but performance, the empire's theater, where submission scripted the play. Emperor, he said, the title of velvet barb, sit, whine. Valerian halted, chains clinking like mocking bells. His daughters froze, the elder's breath catching a gasp swallowed, but not silent. I stand for Rome, Valerian replied, voice cracked but steady, echoing off stone walls. Shapur's laugh was soft, a rustle of silk. Rome stands on borrowed legs now, he gestured, and attendants parted the tent flap, revealing a cleared sward where torches sputtered to life. There, under the open sky, the climax waited not in steel, but shadow. The act unfolded in implication's cruel dance, the details a veil drawn merciful over abyss. Guards herded the women forward, their forms small against the firelight's flicker. Shapur's voice cut the hush, conversational as a host at feast. You burned our temples, chained our envoys, watched as your legions, entertained. Fair trade? No? Valerian's face drained to ash, his plea a guttural roar. No! Gods curse you! But Tirdad's grip held, iron on bone. The magus chanted low, a ward against empire's ghosts. What followed was no frenzy, but ritual, shadows merging, cries muffled by distance and decree, the night's stars averted eyes. Valerian, forced to witness from the tent's threshold, his body a pillar of restrained fury, saw the machine's maw unhinge, not gore, but erasure, the stripping of dignity, family as collateral in conquest's ledger. His daughters' forms twisted in the torch glow, resistance flickering like embers stamped under boot. Time dilated, each breath a century, the wind carrying fragments, silk tearing, a sob swallowed, the low chant of overseers enforcing the script. The crack came subtle, a fault line in granite. As the torches guttered low, Valerian's gaze locked not on the horror, but Shapur searching, perhaps for mercy's fracture. The king met it, unflinching, but in that instant, Tirdad saw the shift. Shapur's fingers tightened on the goblet, a micro-tremor. Doubt? No calculations cost. The emperor hadn't shattered, he'd armored in rage, his whispers to the magus later pleas for his girl's safety, laced with intelligence, Roman weaknesses, Gallienus's fractures, whispers that would seed unrest, filtering back west through escapees' lips. Shapur dismissed them at moonrise, the tent folding like a secret kept. But the break lingered. Valerian, led away, murmured to Tirdad in broken Aramaic, "Your king builds on sand." The Armenian said nothing, but that night, by his watchfire, he filed the chain's notch deeper. The machine hummed, but a gear had slipped just a hair, enough to wonder, did the watcher become the watched? What happened next would alarm an entire empire. Shapur's triumph echoed like a drumbeat through the years that followed, but the machine sputtered in the aftermath's dust. Valerian lingered in captivity 3 years, perhaps 4 accounts blur, as if time itself recoiled. He toiled in Bishapur's shadow, directing Roman masons who arched bridges over the Karun, their hands calloused from aqueducts now serving Persian thirst. No flaying, no straw-stuffed horror. Those were fever dreams of Roman scribes, Lactantius penning vengeance in candle smoke. Shapur, pragmatic as dawn, valued the prisoner's mind conversations in halting Greek over maps, the emperor's grudging counsel on siegecraft. His daughters fared better than shadows suggested, woven into harems, but with status, their Roman tongues teaching court girls Latin graces. One bore a son, half eagle, half fire, a bridge no one crossed. Valerian died quietly, illness claiming him in 264 fever or despair. The body burned with Zoroastrian rites, ashes scattered to the wind. No trophy, just absence. The captives scattered like seeds on fallow ground. Tirdad rose to satrap, his silver armband traded for a governorship in Armenia, but ghosts rode with him, nights haunted by that gorge's cries. He freed a dozen in secret, coins pressed into palms at border posts, their tales fueling Gallienus's rage-fueled reforms. Rome clawed back. Odenathus of Palmyra, that desert fox, harried Persian flanks, reclaiming Mesopotamia by 263. Shapur withdrew, not broken, but bloodied, his machine dented, gears grinding slower. Power shifted east-west in ripples. Gallienus deified his father, coins minted with veiled lies of victory. Persia turned inward, Shapur's builds enduring Shapur's academies, birthing scholars who'd eclipse Rome's libraries. Ironic twist, the deportees' hands raised dams that quenched Zoroastrian flames, their engineering a silent conquest in reverse. The emperor's fall birthed no dynasty's doom, but a fragile truce, empires nursing wounds like wary beasts. She had 3 days left. She didn't know it yet. Centuries buried the gorge's echoes, but stone remembers. In 1933, a German archaeologist named Ernst Herzfeld knelt at Naksh-e-Rostam, that cliffside necropolis near Persepolis, chisel in hand. The air hummed with cicadas, the rock warm as blood under his palms. He'd come chasing Ardashir's shadow, but found Shapur's boast, the Res Gestae, carved trilingual in Middle Persian, Parthian, Greek, 80 feet of triumph etched in granite. There, panel by panel, the king towered, horse rearing over Gordian's corpse, hand clasping Philip's in mock peace, and Valerian kneeling, not groveling, his posture one of counsel, not crawl, no footstool, no flayed hide. Herzfeld traced the lines, flashlight beam dancing like firelight, heart pounding. This was no propaganda scrap. It was the victor's ledger, raw and unyielding. Further digs unearthed the captive's mark. Bandi Caesar, that soaring dam near Shushtar, its Roman arches defying time, water still rushing through channels hewn by Edessa's survivors. Pottery shards in Shapur's ruins whispered Antioch's clay bowls, glazed in Syrian blues, bearing Latin graffiti. Roma invicta, defiant even in defeat. Herzfeld's finds rippled to scholars like Turaj Daryai, an Iranian-American historian piecing the puzzle in quiet UCLA libraries. In 2009, his Sasanian Persia cracked the code. Lactantius's horrors, Christian payback, penned in 318 to vilify pagan persecutors. The gorge's truth, a calculated humiliation, yes, public marches, forced labors, but no sadistic spectacle. Shapur's machine sought utility, not spectacle, revenge in utility's slow grind. Daryai poured over ostraca from the digs, receipts for Roman wheat rations, a senator's plea scratched on clay, tangible ghosts, these, proving the captives lived, built, endured. Why does this matter now, in our feed-saturated age? One parallel grounds it: modern POW exchanges, where leaders parade the broken not for justice, but narrative control videos of knelt generals, families leveraged in shadow deals. Shapur teaches power's anatomy, not the sword's flash, but the stare's weight, the system's quiet coercion turning victors to tools. It echoes in boardrooms, where empires of code and capital capture rivals' minds, forcing them to build the cage anew. Human nature bends but doesn't break clean, resistance hides in filed notches, whispered Latin under Persian stars. The universal truth, triumph is temporary, the watched always become watchers. Valerian's gaze, locked in that gorge, birthed no monsters, but mirrors reminding us that every machine has a human hand at the wheel, trembling just a little. The dust settles now on that Syrian plain, time sent faded to memory's ghost. Edessa's walls stand, weathered but unbowed, olive leaves silver in the breeze that once carried screams. Valerian kneels no more, his chains rust in some forgotten gorge, dissolved by rains that wash all clean. They were meant to vanish the emperor, his daughters, the legion's roar, swallowed by Persia's vast maw, their stories scripted as footnotes in conquest's scroll, but they didn't. They carved themselves into rock at Naksh-e-Rostam, arched bridges over rivers that run to this day, etched pleas on shards that scholars dust off in fluorescent halls, documents from Ctesiphone's vaults, reliefs hewn by royal chisels, memories traded in Palmyrene bazaars. They survived the machine's grind, and now they're here, with you, because you chose to listen, because in the hearing, the watched claim the gaze. If this tale stirred something rage, wonder, A quiet fire, drop a comment below. What empire's machine haunts you most today? Your words keep these echoes alive. Then silence falls, as it did that night in the gorge. The stars reclaim the sky.